So Google's brilliantly lovable Pixel 4a smartphone is finally about to hit the Google Store in about a week's time for just 350 of your British quids, which I'd certainly say is excellent value for money. But then along came Xiaomi's brilliant Poco X3 NFC, which quite frankly, for just 200 quid, the amount of tech stuffed inside of this thing is a very tempting proposition indeed. So which do you go for, Pixel or Poco? Well, let's do a full side-by-side comparison, and for more on the latest greatest tech, please do poke, subscribe, and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So let's start this comparison as always with a look at the design, and with the Pixel and the Poco lined up side by side like this, you might notice a slight size difference. This is a proper full-on David and Goliath situation. The Pixel is a pleasingly compact 5.7 inches, so feels great in the hand, nice and easy to use one-handed and everything. The Poco X3 NFC absolutely towers over it though at almost 6.7 inches. And both of them do offer a bit of extra one-handed help in the fact that you can pull down the notifications bar from anywhere on screen, for instance, but definitely if you want something that's just easy to manage, can slip into any pocket, etc., Pixel's the way to go. Besides that rather obvious difference, they're fairly similar in other respects. You've got nice skinny bezels surrounding both of the displays, but you do have a slightly different cut-out selfie camera orifice on these two as well. It's centrally positioned on the Poco, shunted off to the corner on the Pixel, which I personally prefer. There is another invisible difference between the Pixel and the Poco, however, and that you've got Gorilla Glass 3 caught in the screen on the Pixel just to protect it from scratches and scuffs. That's actually updated to Gorilla Glass 5 here on the Poco X3 to make it a little bit more hardy. And as if that wasn't enough, Xiaomi has also bunged a pre-installed screen protector on the Poco X3 NFC as well for a bit of extra protection. Now if you flip both the Pixel 4a and the Poco X3 NFC around, they are both constructed from plastic. You've got a polycarbonate arse end on them. From this side, it's pretty obvious which one's the Pixel and which one's the Poco, because of course they've both got a bit of rear end branding, although one is slightly more subtle than the other. Gotta say, neither design is particularly thrilling. You've got a bit more going on the Poco, not just with the massive frickin' logo, but also with the funky circular camera chassis, which is a bit love and hate. Some people aren't really a fan. And of course you've got this rather funky stripe right down the center too. And in the case of the Pixel 4a, as you can see there, it's a very straightforward design, about as exciting as a dead guppy, but it does have this matte finish, and one of the advantages of that is it doesn't show up fingerprint grease and scuffs quite so easily, so you won't be constantly buffing it on your trousers like the Poco. And if you're at least hoping for some exciting color combinations to kind of make them a little bit more thrilling, well, you're pretty much out of luck on that front as well. The Poco basically comes in two colors, this grey effort or a slightly more vibrant blue effort. In the case of the Google Pixel 4a, it's only available in just black. Now both phones rock a physical fingerprint sensor, none of that in-display nonsense. You've got a rear-mounted one here on the Pixel 4a, whereas it's edge-mounted on the Poco X3 NFC. And I got no personal preference, both of them are nice and nippy and responsive, they'll definitely do the job. However, in the case of the Poco X3 NFC, that fingerprint sensor is also backed by face recognition, which as you can see there is just as nippy and responsive as well, something you don't get in the Pixel 4a. Now let's have a shift here at the software, and of course both of these smartphones are running the latest Android 10, but in very different guises. So here on the Pixel 4a, of course, it is stock Android as you'd expect from a Google handset. That said, the Pixel 4a does boast some Pixel-only features that you will only find on Google-branded handsets you won't find on other Android smartphones. So, for instance, you've got the likes of the Recorder app, which can very helpfully transcribe all of the recorded audio for you. Very handy if you find yourself in interviews, meetings, things like that. And you've also got the likes of the Now Playing feature as well, which can tell you whatever random track is playing over the radio, so you're not spending the rest of the day thinking, oh goddamn, who is that again? Meanwhile, the Poco X3 NFC also has Android 10 on board, but that's been customized with the Poco Launcher, which is basically a tweaked version of Xiaomi's own MIUI 12, but with a much more stock Android look and feel. And one of the advantages is you get a shag load of bonus features chucked there on top of Android as well, including the aforementioned face recognition. You've got the likes of the Game Turbo tool, which can be called up whenever you're playing, a nice bit of Call of Duty, PUBG Mobile or whatever. Gives you lots of great features like the ability to open up messenger apps and the web browser right there in a mini window while you're playing the game. And there's loads of extra bonus bits as well, like screen recorder tools, the ability to listen to audio on any of your apps while the screen is switched off. There is an absolute ton of stuff rammed in there. I've done you a full MIUI 12 tips and tricks guide, so go check that out for all you need to know on the best new bonus features and everything. All you need to know is I wasn't really a fan of MIUI until MIUI 12, but they've sorted out a lot of the little kinks and issues, and now it's a lot more enjoyable, the occasional little add and other little issues aside. Now obviously in these plaguey times, contactless payments have become more important than ever, and the good news is that both of these smartphones boast NFC, as you kind of expect from the Poco X3 NFC, with Google Pay support, so you can use your phone to pay for whatever. And the added bonus to that Pixel phone is the fact you actually get an OLED display on here as well, whereas the cheaper X3 NFC just uses a basic IPS panel. And both of these phones rock a Full HD Plus resolution. You will get slightly crisper images on the Pixel merely because it's a smaller screen, but the visuals are still perfectly sharp on that Poco despite the fact it's freaking huge. I definitely still like the visuals on the Poco X3 NFC, even though it's not an OLED, you still get some pretty poppy colours and it's nice and bright, certainly bright enough to use outdoors, no worries. But the OLED panel on that Pixel 4a, it just produces nicer colour temperature. It's not quite as warm as the Poco X3 NFC. It's definitely got a more powerful brightness on that top level as well, so again, perfect for outdoors visibility. And for your HDR content as well, you got full HDR10 support on the Poco, despite the fact that it's only 200 quid, which is great, but it's HDR10 Plus here on the Pixel 4a. And if you want to, you can actually play around with the colour output here in the display settings on both the Pixel and the Poco. I find you really do have to manually tweak the colour temperature here on the Poco if you want to make it a bit cooler. However, one area where the Poco X3 NFC display definitely beats the Pixel 4a hands down is the refresh rate, because you can bump that all the way up to 120Hz. That's an option you most definitely do not get on the Pixel 4a, which tops off at 60Hz. As for the audio, you've actually got stereo speakers on both of these blowers, although I found that the stereo speaker setup was slightly better on the Poco X3 NFC. That top speaker on the Pixel is rather weak. That said, I do actually still prefer the audio that is spaffed out by the Pixel 4a, because it's a bit bolder, a bit louder, and the clarity is just that little bit better compared with the Poco, which can sound a little bit tinny. When it comes to performance, the Poco, despite being the far cheaper, more affordable handset, is actually superior, because what you got here is the freshest Snapdragon 732G chipset compared with the older 730G packed into the Pixel 4a. However, as you can see from the benchmarking scores, not a huge difference between the two in terms of just general processing power, and certainly when it comes to gaming, I'll be perfectly happy with the Pixel 4a as well. Both of these smartphones can play Call of Duty Mobile and PUBG Mobile on those top detail settings with a perfectly smooth frame rate throughout. And that's definitely helped along by the fact that both of these blowers have 6GB of RAM stuffed inside. But of course, when it comes to the gaming, you do have those excellent game turbo features on the Poco X3 NFC, which you don't get on the Pixel 4a. And as for your general everyday performance, well, I've used both of these smartphones as my full-time personal blower for around a week or so. And as you can see, apps just load up straight away. You know, you're not hanging around waiting for stuff to happen. They're nice and smooth. However, if you were hoping for a bit of 5G support for proper future-proofing, well, neither the Pixel 4a nor the Poco X3 NFC unfortunately has built-in 5G support. You're going to be looking at the likes of the Realme X50 5G, the Moto G 5G Plus, or the OnePlus Nord, something that rocks the 765 or the 765G chipsets for that built-in 5G. And on the battery front, the Poco X3 NFC is once again the winner. It's got a mighty 5160 mAh battery compared with the slightly more teeny 3080 mAh packed into the Pixel 4a. But despite that huge difference in battery capacity, there's not actually a massive difference when it comes to the battery life in general. With the Pixel 4a, you'll still scrape through a busy day on a single charge. With the Poco X3 NFC, you'll generally end a busy day with around 20% battery life remaining, so don't expect to go, half a week between charges or anything. But if you are a power user, if you do a lot of Skyping or Zooming or just gaming and things like that on your smartphone, you're probably going to want to look at the Poco instead. And also, the Poco has the bonus of faster 33-watt charging as well versus the 18-watt charging on the Pixel 4a. On the storage tip, you got 128 gigs stuffed inside the Pixel 4a. With the Poco X3 NFC, this £200 model comes with just 64 gigs, but you can throw a bit of extra cash at Xiaomi in order to upgrade to the 128 gig model. At the time of shooting, it was 249, although you can get it reduced to 229 if you manage to get in nice and early. That's not so much of an issue on the Poco though, because you do have micro SD memory card expandability as well, something that the Pixel 4a does not offer. Now let's finish up with a look at the camera tech on these two blowers as well. And the Pixel 4a actually rocks a single lens rear setup, which is exceedingly rare in 2020, whereas of course the Poco X3 NFC, as usual with most budget phones, goes absolutely bonkers with a quad lens setup. But of course, as well we know, it is quality, not quantity, that counts. So what you've got on the Pixel 4a is a 12.2 megapixel primary camera, whereas on the Poco X3 NFC, it's a 64 megapixel effort. And this does capture photos at a 16 megapixel resolution by default, rather than that full 64 megapixels using 4-in-1 pixel binning just to brighten up shots when needed. But if you dive on into the Pro mode, you can actually shoot at that full 64 meg. Now I found that when you keep these phones in full-on auto mode, the Pixel 4a is undoubtedly the winner. It's so good at just pointing and shooting and capturing great results in pretty much any conditions. When it comes to color capture, both of them do really well, but again the Pixel just about edges out the Poco with impeccably natural hues. And while the Poco X3 performs perfectly admirably for a £200 smartphone in those HDR situations where you got strong contrast, again the Pixel is undoubtedly the winner. You've actually got individual control over the brightness in those darker elements as well as the overall brightness. And in low light situations, the Pixel's night mode is once again the winner hands down, somehow managing to once again serve up photos with accurate colours and sharp detail, while the Poco can slightly boost the brightness and nothing more. However, where the Poco X3 NFC does have the advantage is when it comes to the bonus camera modes, because both of them have the likes of the night sight, which I just mentioned, and a portrait mode as well, which helps your subjects really stand out by blur in the background, which works impressively well here on the Pixel, again despite the fact it doesn't have a depth sensor unlike the Poco. But then you've got a whole bunch of extra stuff here on the Poco, like that full-on Pro mode where you can control the likes of the ISO level, the white balance, and shoot all the way up to that 64 megapixel mode. And of course the Poco also rocks that ultra-wide angle lens as well. It's a 13 megapixel effort, so as you can see you can get a nice pulled out view of the action when you need to, although I found that the colour reproduction does suffer somewhat in this mode. And last up in that quad lens setup, you've also got a 2 megapixel macro lens as well, which I find utterly pointless because you got that 64 megapixel mode, just shoot a 64 meg picture of whatever you're trying to get a close-up of and then zoom in. As for video, where you can shoot 4K resolution home movies at 30 frames per second on both of these blows, and you get good looking results with both as well, respectable image stabilization, strong detail, and those decent natural looking colours shining through once again. And then if you swap around to the front facing camera, you've got a modest 8 megapixel effort here on the Pixel 4a, and it's a 20 megapixel selfie snapper here on the Poco. But again, the Pixel churns out fantastic looking results. You've got those full portrait mode smarts on either as well, so again you can blur out the background if you want it to be all about you. I found that again in those HDR situations with the strong contrast, if you're shooting against a nice bright sky or something like that, again the Pixel 4a shines that little bit brighter, but you know, if you're on the grams, either will do you just fine. And that right there is how I think the Pixel stacks up against the Poco. So as you can see, two very different prospects indeed. I love the compact dinky finish of the Pixel, and of course that camera tech is fantastic, but the Poco offers extremely good value for money, definitely very impressive tech indeed. But which one do you personally prefer? It'd be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I've done full reviews of both of these smartphones after using them as my full-time blows for a week, so have to go check that out for all you need to know about each of them. And for more of the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers!